everybody. Welcome everybody to today's conference on digitalization and the future of higher education. I'm Annika, the Director of Digital Learning and PhD programs at the Hertie School. And I'm very happy to see so many could make it to join us today. I would like to give the floor to Hertie School's acting president, Mark Hallerberg, to welcome you all. Mark, would you turn on your video and audio to take the floor?
Thank you very much, Annika. It's a delight to be here. I would like to extend a warm welcome to our distinguished speakers, as well as to all the viewers who are joining us today from many countries in Europe and indeed beyond. It is a great pleasure for us at the Hertie School to host this first dissemination conference of CIVICA, the European University of Social Sciences, on the very timely topic of digitalization and the future of higher education. One of the key goals of CIVICA and other European university alliances is to drive innovation in higher education. I mean, we are, of course, coming from universities. Since the start of the pilot phase in October 2019, we have been experimenting with new tools and formats in order to connect the 8 higher education institutions within our alliance. Digital activities and tools have played a key role in our strategy from the very beginning. This mission has been greatly accelerated indeed by the pandemic. I imagine that many of you are used to being here on Zoom or in other sorts of formats that have become basically simply part of our lives. All over the world, higher education institutions have had to move their teaching online, not just us. This has been a challenging and unprecedented experience, which has forced us to innovate and rethink the way that we teach, and indeed the ways that we even do research. Our participation in a European University Alliance has proved a strength in these difficult times and has revealed all the potential of digital technologies to facilitate cooperation in the higher education sector, as well as the mobility of students and staff. Our experience with online teaching at the Hertie School has shown that with the right support from experts in digital learning and the right tools, the quality of teaching and learning, as well as the student experience, can even be improved. On the other hand, teachers and students do miss face-to-face interactions, and we are all facing online fatigue at the moment. In this context, we are currently thinking, together with many other higher education institutions, about how best to take advantage of digitalization in the future. We dedicate this conference to the memory of Hendrik Enderlein, who served as president of the Hertie School until earlier this year and unfortunately passed away this last Friday at the age of 46, following a diagnosis of advanced cancer. Hendrik was, I must say, a very good friend. He was a visionary leader for a school and an incredibly respected partner for the entire CIVICA family. One of the many ways he has left a profound impact is through his tireless commitment for European collaboration. He was an ardent believer in the European idea, and he oversaw the building of strategic partnerships between the Hertie School and other institutions, such as those that laid the foundation for CIVICA. In his role as president of the Hertie School, he contributed to shaping the identity of our alliance as a force for the European common good. Hendrik's legacy lives on at the Hertie School and indeed across CIVICA. The topic of today's conference was actually inspired by Hendrik, who understood the necessity to reflect on lessons learned from the pandemic and think about how to build on our collective experience to shape higher education in the post-COVID world. In this honor, this conference offers a platform for dialogue among policymakers, experts, practitioners, and students to exchange best practices and disseminate ideas on how to move forward. Now, I'm sure that we will all learn a lot from this discussion, and I greatly encourage viewers to participate and to share their views. I would now like to pass the floor to Vanessa Scherrer, who is Vice President for International Affairs at Sciences Po in Paris and a member of CIVICA's steering committee. Vanessa has played a key role in building our alliance, and I cannot think of a better person to introduce CIVICA. Thank you, Vanessa, for all of your hard work. It's great to see you, and the floor is indeed yours.
Thank you very much, President Hallerberg, dear Mark. It's also a pleasure to be with you. Thank you, dear Annika, dear colleagues, dear students and participants. On behalf indeed of the presidents, the steering committee and the entire community of CIVICA as the coordinator of our European university, It's a real joy for me to launch with you, Mark, and everyone, our first dissemination conference, and therefore share some first accomplishments and highlights of our alliance in the realm of digitalization in higher education. The progress we have made collectively and the new horizons we have opened in less than 2 years are quite frankly spectacular. CIVICA unites 8 world-class European institutions in the social sciences. It counts over 50,000 students and some 10,000 faculty members, building upon decades of successful partnerships between us. And thanks to the support and the historical mobilization of Erasmus+ and the EU Commission, who I'd like to thank very much on this occasion, we could join forces to reaffirm the vital role of European social sciences in educating future generations and bringing solutions to the most pressing challenges in Europe, thanks to our research and our innovative impact on society. It so happens that digital transformation has been at the core of the CIVICA project since day one, long before the horrendous pandemic that we have encountered. Thanks to digital education, and in addition to all the in-person opportunities that we must revive as soon as possible, this is also very important to emphasize, CIVICA embodies that students from all over Europe and all over the world, as a matter of fact, may access new and more flexible curricula that we will offer in Europe. It showcases that professors and researchers may collaborate and share knowledge more easily across borders and disciplines than any time before. That members of the academy may build and exchange knowledge with the policy world in a much more free way. That higher education institutions may increase their impact in society in reaching out to new, more diverse audiences from all backgrounds and regions, and that gaps with the general public may be reduced. This is a promise carried by CIVICA with our digital European campus since day one. And that is what our distinguished speakers will exchange about today. So at that point, if I may, I would like to thank very much the hundreds of team members of our teams at Bocconi University, at the Hertie School, Central European University, SNSPA, Stockholm School of Economics, the London School of Economics, Sciences Po, all these team members. There are more than 300 of them who work on a daily basis for our European university, who made all this come true for our students, our faculty, and the wider public. The entire CIVICA community responded to the pandemic with a reactivity which reflected the depth of our dedication to our European alliance and made it a laboratory for the transformation of our universities. I would also like to thank very, very much our colleagues and friends from the Hertie School who have taken the lead on today's conference as the leading institution for Work Package 9, as everyone knows, in charge of dissemination, which is an essential dimension of each of our ambitions. And finally, but most importantly indeed, please allow me to join President Hallerberg in thanking our friend and colleague, the former president of the Hertie School, Henrik Enderlein, whom we mourn today with an immense sadness, but who will always remember as a leading founding father of our European University. Henrik was a distinguished professor and a cherished mentor, an active and admired public figure, a subtle but convinced European at heart, an inspiring leader, an alumnus of Sciences Po, and of course a friend to many of us. And from his own words that many of us have heard, I can say that CIVICA corresponded with Henrik's vision. his vision for Europe, for universities, for public policy, for the young generation, and his hope too. His sparkling and communicative intelligence, his vision, his pragmatism, his energy, and his tenacity when it came to issues so dear to him have given strength to CIVICA at birth. So thank you to Henrik Enderlein, whom we miss very much today.
Thank you very much, Vanessa, for these kind words as well. I remember when I started at the Hertie School 1.5 years ago, Henrik was telling me, I was taking over this double role also as director of digital. And he said, Annika, but we are not going to move everything online. And I said, no. He was really caring for the human encounter. I think that was really Henrik, taking care of so many people at the same time. Many thanks, Vanessa, for introducing CIVICA and its manifold activities also. The goal of today's conference is indeed to reflect on all the experiences we have done across the various universities that build this CIVICA network. So I just wanted to mention quickly the idea for this conference. And the idea was indeed twofold. Firstly, we wanted to hear a multitude of voices and perspectives. So what does the move online mean for students, for faculty members, for early career researchers, my PhDs, the staff, those who supported the move online? Experiences might differ greatly, and it is, I think, now time to listen to each other and to learn from each other, to understand what is obvious to some that might not be obvious to the others, simply because we haven't been talking to each other. This is why today we have invited faculty members, students, policymakers, and digital learning practitioners. Secondly, today's goal was that we wanted to look ahead to start a discussion how the pandemic has transformed our scholarly practices. So for the better or for the worse, that's to be discovered, right? And on what we have learned and how we want to use our learning to build our future, because it's up to us to build this future, what we think is worthwhile investing now. We will now hear a short video with people from the CIVICA network and what they have to say on digitalization and higher education. After that, Mr. Laso Ballesteros, cabinet expert from Commissioner Gabriel, will give his keynote. We will then start our panel discussion and invite also the audience in various ways to engage and to participate. Please also watch the chat where Irina, our communications manager, where you will post some info on how you can contribute and engage in the discussion. Before we start the little video, I would like to especially thank Irina Estelia, our CIVICA communications manager, for her fantastic and tireless work to get this conference up and running. I've never seen somebody putting so much dedicated effort in the preparation. So anything that goes wrong is to blame on me. And she's also the person who has created the video with the short interviews, which we will also share the full videos after the conference. So, okay, let's see the video then.
Development of technology in the last decade and a half has created significant new opportunities for higher education.
We as students have experienced in the last months that online learning is really practical.
I'm particularly excited about the ways that the new technologies create abundant new opportunities to connect what's going on inside universities to communities and regions outside. And as we see with CIVICA, even across national borders and continents.
I greatly enjoyed taking part in the CIVICA panel as it provided a low-threshold way of meeting researchers across CIVICA universities who are working on similar topics.
CIVICA is working on the concept of mobility and interaction of Master of Science students, a course where students belonging to different universities have the possibility to have a learning experience together. Thanks to technology, the course, the multi-campus course, really can exist and can have immediately an impact.
If this class would have been held in a physical setting, the exchange between the students from the different campuses would have been much more restricted. So this setup did not attempt to bridge two otherwise separate classrooms, but we had one virtual classroom.
We've discovered during the pandemic that suddenly it becomes much easier to bring in, for example, guest speakers. And I think that's really one of the things to leverage. And I think that CIVICA is a perfect platform for us to do this.
Artificial intelligence, the data we have, the big data we are capable to put together will be an amazing help in personalizing education.
So the priority really must be to incorporate digital tools where it helps to foster flexible learning and student interaction, but also to acknowledge that digital transformation does not imply moving digital by all means.
One opportunity that digitalization offers is flexibility. For example, the possibility to watch in replay, to watch later a course. This means that education has the potential to be more inclusive, especially toward workers, but also towards people who have care duties at home.
Most of the past year were sort of spent in emergency response mode. So I think now it will be crucial to really sit down and assess what worked well and what maybe didn't work so well in digital education.
Okay, this was to show you some more of the voices we have across the network and who are thinking about what we experience, and some of those who are experts also in this. I would now like to give the floor to Mr. Laso Ballesteros. He's the cabinet expert of Commissioner Gabriel for Innovation, Research, Education, Culture and Youth at the European Commission. He has been a senior official at the European Commission since 20 years, with responsibilities such as the head of a Startup Europe for 9 years and deputy head of innovation ecosystems at the European Innovations Council. Mr. Laso Ballesteros, can I ask you to please put on your audio and video so you can take the floor?
Thank you. Yeah, now it's working. Thank you. Thank you very much, Annika, for your kind words. Allow me to start give the thanks for inviting the Commissioner Gabriel to join you for this CIVICA's first dissemination conference. Unfortunately, the Commissioner has not been able to be here with you today, but she sends you her regards and congratulations for organizing this very timely dissemination event. Allow me to start by giving my condolences, and also on behalf of Commissioner Gabriel, to Professor Hertie and Derlain's family and friends. His contributions to CIVICA, as we have heard before, from his position of president of the Hertie School, has been remarkable as one of the leading founders of CIVICA. On this sense, CIVICA, as one of the European universities, are one of the most promising initiatives under the portfolio of Commissioner Gabriel. You are acting as pathfinders, scouting how to adapt higher education institutions to gain critical mass and beat the challenges in front of us. It is always a pleasure to meet, to discuss the way forward, taking into account your experience and expertise. This is especially true regarding a challenge like digitalization. COVID-19 has had a huge impact on education as a whole, and higher education was not an exception. You have to change the way you deliver knowledge and skills almost overnight. At the same time, the responsibility of discovering ways forward for the crisis fell on your shoulders too. Your institutions house our best and our brightest. So today's topic is very pertinent and very timely. How can digital education empower you to fulfill your mission with safety and excellence in mind, contributing to a more open, innovative, and inclusive society? Here there are three elements that we believe should be part of that. First, the digital technology broadens the space to connect to each other. Indeed, European universities are predicated to this idea. Virtual campuses and the ability to be more mobile will contribute to a more open Europe. Second, technology also allows us to broaden skills delivery, both during degrees and throughout our life, leading to more people being capable of innovating. That is why on the policy side, we are working on micro-credentials. We want to have a framework that empowers you to make use of these solutions. And third, it helps those that do not normally have access to work to participate. Digital education, wherever you are, even in rural communities, in a distant member states or despite any disability, makes your institution more inclusive. Of course, as straightforward as this sounds, we are well aware of the challenges ahead. Compared to other levels of education, certainly universities are better prepared, with lessons that continued virtually through streaming, also using already existing learning management systems. However, this happened with a varying degree of quality regarding learning design. Taking uptake was quick. Adapting the way we deliver skills and teaching to new possibilities remains still a challenge. In addition, we could be tempted to compartmentalize each of our three goals. Yet, I would argue that if we learn anything from the pandemic, is that these goals often are synergetic. And this means we need an integrated approach to technology. Of course, against this poses a challenge. So how are we addressing these challenges from a policy perspective? So three components. First, we have the Digital Education Action Plan. This plan focuses on a two-pronged approach, both developing a solid digital education ecosystem and developing digital skills. Both of these points will support you in the digital transformation of your institutions. Of course, in practice, we need practitioners to share their experience and develop our goals into concrete change. This means cross-sectorial collaboration and knowledge sharing. To that end, we count on the European Digital Education Hub. This will be a space where higher education institutions can join the rest of the education and training community in shaping digital education practices along the policy developments that affect it. Second, at the Digital Education Action Plan, we will continue to support your efforts to address these challenges through the European Universities Initiative. I called you before pathfinders for a reason. Your experience will inform many of our policy-making efforts, being of consequence not only for your institutions, but for the higher education community in Europe as a whole. Indeed, we have learned a lot already, and I am paying close attention. On behalf of the Commissioner Gabriel and the whole services, we have heard the sector's call for higher and more long-term funding. We understand that this is crucial for higher education institutions. You need stability for a long-term perspective. We also heard the sector's call to keep an inclusive approach. For that, we are considering expanding the initiative, giving opportunities to higher education institutions to join existing alliances or form new ones. At the same time, we also understand that to realize your ambitions and that of the European Universities Initiative as a whole, you need an enabling environment at all levels, not only within your institutions, but also at national and European level. From our part, we are committed to support member states and higher education institutions in creating this policy framework that will allow for seamless transnational collaboration between higher education institutions in Europe. This should be complemented with incentives at European as well as national level. Third, all of this feedback will be instrumental for the next step on our policy agenda, the new European strategy for universities. The strategy will continue to encourage transnational collaboration, but it will also focus on the deep transformation of institutions themselves. We are talking here about moving from university campuses into innovation ecosystems, notably as regards the technical universities, like the case of Delft University in the Netherlands, whose rector said the other day that he has transformed the university campus of Delft University into an innovation ecosystem where the investors and the entrepreneurs are coming into the campus, into the ecosystem, without realizing they are entering a university campus. We are taking lessons from the European universities and channeling them towards the rest of the higher education landscape. We want to support the entire higher education sector, reaching out to the more than 5,000 higher education institutions across Europe. In the coming months, we will launch an online public consultation to reach out to a wider audience, and we will continue with our targeted consultations in which the participation of the CIVICA Alliance is much appreciated. Commission and Gabriel wants to applaud your efforts to address the digital transformation of higher education, not as an island of its own, but as a set of challenges to be solved in an integrated way with a strategic horizontal priority. And the Commissioner would be delighted to hear more of your experience in doing so, because the path you are discovering will be tracked by many institutions of higher education in Europe. This is true for your adaptation to COVID-19, but also for how you have recently put your early stage researchers course catalog online. I am grateful on behalf of Commissioner Gabriel for this opportunity to be here with you today. This dissemination conference offers us and many others from the wider higher education sectors the opportunity to learn from your experience. I look forward to us continue working together. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Mr. Laso Ballesteros, for your insightful contribution and also to share with us more what the European Commission is doing over these past months. And it is, of course, a unique window of opportunity that we can't miss, and we shouldn't lose the momentum, absolutely, with all these discussions. So also thank you for sharing this major vision of the digital education plan and what the Commission is trying to achieve here, where we want to go and why we want to go there. I have been since long a promoter of open and online education, so that's all honey in my ears. So I think it's now up to really make a vision, an idea, to make that a reality that is really working. We will have to engage citizens and professionals across Europe, everybody at all levels. And I think it's thus important to listen to the different voices, to engage them, to create, to learn, to develop, and importantly, to put the new good and perhaps best practices in place everywhere. And that the starting point is, of course, by sharing and by listening to each other. I would thus thank you very much. I hope you might have the time to join a little bit of our panel discussion. I think I would move over to our panelists, to our distinguished panelists now. And perhaps I could ask all the panelists now to put on their audio and video, or at least the video, not the audio, but the video, so we don't have too much background noise. And I would like to introduce the panelists in alphabetical order with the first name, just that you know there is a logic in here. And I start with Annika. Annika, a colleague of mine at the Hertie School. Annika is professor of public policy at the Hertie School. And Annika has been teaching in spring 2021 together with Bruno Perlier from Sciences Po CIVICA joint master course on welfare states in transition. And she might be telling us something about that later on. Then we have Professor Dilly Fung, who is since a while the LSE Pro Director for Education since July 2018. And there she oversees the student education across the school and working with some of my dear colleagues at the LSE. Dilly has been involved in CIVICA undergraduate and master's working packages and is part of a cross-campus team developing the CIVICA Engaged track, and a bachelor experience that connects study with civic engagement. The first week, perhaps we can mention, the first week of CIVICA Engaged, the CIVICA European Week takes place from the 8th to 11th June and is hosted by the Stockholm School of Economics. Then we have Hilda. Hilda is a third-year BS student at the Stockholm School of Economics. And since January 2020, Hilda has been an active member of the CIVICA task force at the Stockholm School of Economics with a special focus on the undergraduate work package. So she's working together with Dilly. And You are also involved on the master's level work package, I think to remember. Then we have Leonardo Caporarello from Bocconi University. He's professor of practice of organizational behavior in the leadership, organization and human resource knowledge group at Bocconi School of Management. And Leonardo is, I've known Leonardo in the work package 4 we are working in together, which is led by Bocconi University, greatly led by Bocconi University. And he's particularly involved with regard to developing an. Okay, and then we have Remus Prikopje, is professor and rector of the National University of Political Studies and Public Administration in Bucharest. And Remus is part of CIVICA's President's Committee, the Alliance top governing body. That is our panel. And before we start our discussion, I wanted to make a quick note. So we will talk about online education, and online education, of course, existed, even though as a rare plant, admittedly, since a long time. Some was done, I remember, via radio and sending postal letters to learn. So online education has been introduced last year on a massive scale and very suddenly. I think at the Hertie school, we had 1 week to move 100 courses online. But it was introduced because and during the pandemic. So many experiences we made were made during a very difficult time for most of us. Things we missed, like seeing and hugging a friend, enjoying culture, going for a run, were suddenly not possible. We might even have lost a relative. So online education happened in this context, and this might shape our perception for a long time to come. So I would just like everybody to reflect on that and to remember that during our discussion now, that this was a very particular moment to introduce online. Let's move to our first question, so we get the panel talking and not me, that I would like to ask to all our panelists. And I would like to start with Annika. So we probably all made new and different experiences with the move to digital education. So what is a moment from the past year that might give us a typical or some insight on what the move meant for you or for the people you were working with? Annika, do you remember such a particular moment?
Thank you, Annika. And I certainly remember this very swift move we had to make during the semester within a week to move the courses online. And I was teaching a course which I have taught for a long time, but always on site. And once we moved online, what I realized very quickly is that in my on-site teaching, I actually use physical movements a lot. I mean, not physical contact, but it's very different when you are in a room. And when I also move around a lot when I teach, and I sort of have a lot of eye contact. And when you move your teaching from on-site to online, you realize there is no eye contact anymore. You see your students, but you don't know who you're really looking at, and students do not feel addressed immediately by what you say. And also you can't be sort of closer or more distance from the students. So you have to replace that. I think, there was immediately the feeling that there's a sort of physical component missing when you move online. And despite the fact there are lots of positive sides to that, you have to compensate, I think, for the physical closeness to your students. So you have to think about other ways of liaising. And I think to work on liaising with students in a different way, both in the classroom and during class time, but also outside the classroom in other ways, either in office hours, but also having breakout groups, having other activities, making sure that there are activities is really important, because it's not just the relationship between me and the students, but it's also between the students themselves that you have to compensate for, that you have to make a connection between people. And I think online connections are different to on-site connections, but you have to make sure that this connection actually takes place.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm also a mover when I'm teaching, and I can absolutely share this with you. And I'm also, teaching the teachers, and I even speak about, right, how we create proximity with our students through moving through the room. So absolutely. Let's move to Hilda to get the student perspective. Is there anything you remember, or you want to react to Annika, or anything you remember as an experience you would like to share, Hilda?
Yes, of course. I can definitely agree with what Annika just mentioned. But my experience, I would say, was so during our last year, if you specialize in management, you write a case for a company. And so we conducted these interviews online for a company who has employees all over Europe, basically. And then during our final presentation, we presented to the company, and usually you only present at the headquarters in Stockholm. For the headquarters there, but now we were able to present it to people from all over the world, and people that we had been discussing with, interviewing, and I think that was lovely to also get their input. And so that was a positive aspect of this digital education, I would say.
Thank you for sharing that. Certainly it moves down. I mean, I once organized a conference shaking the bricks and mortar of the higher education buildings, right? We are pulling down the walls. Remus, was there a moment for you that reflects what was so particular about this last 12 months that was typical somehow you would like to share?
Digital, as very well was mentioned, is not something new. It was not something new for my university, but also for all universities around the world. What the pandemic situation did was to accelerate the integration of the digital instruments already existing, the acceleration of integration of these instruments in the classroom. And when we decided to switch immediately, it was unclear what's going to happen. In fact, CNSPA was the first institution announcing in Romania we stop physical teaching, and within 4 days we will switch entirely on online till it will be clear what's going on. And we did this quite easy because we started online education 21 years ago, and practically for all classes we had already prepared the online courses. But that doesn't mean it was easy, because as Annika mentioned, I graduated teacher training program. I am a professor, and for me to see my students directly in their eyes, it's a way of feedback for me. It's a way to understand if the class from professor's perspective is going well or not. So I missed as professor this interaction, this dialogue, and many of our professors in CNSPA missed this. But at the same time, we discovered, as Hilda mentioned, other opportunities. For example, it was much easier to invite speakers to the class, not so complicated to have a guest from Bucharest or from Cluj or for other countries, and to integrate their knowledge, their experience in the class. Also, it was much easier to have as mentioned, research, publication, and so on. In fact, we used, as I mentioned, our old online platforms, including the library. But previously, even though the online library was there, probably it was not used as a real potential. However, going back to my pedagogical training, education and higher education has different objectives. One objective is to learn about a subject, social science in our case. But higher education means also a kind of social connection, integration of each student and even of professors in a learning community. And probably we will need some time to use the digital instruments for this. From my point of view, digital, and I conclude, has helped us to cross a frontier, a barrier, and to easily use already existing instruments as professors and students, but at the same time, there are a lot of risks on which we should be aware. And the risks are associated with the quality, with legislation. We don't have enough rules in Romania and across Europe to assure the correct use of these instruments. Also, it's a matter of finance. Let me just conclude with one specific example. We decided on the spot, we means the leadership of my university, to increase 20% the level of scholarship for connectivity, because we realized that might be an issue. So we couldn't afford to help students with devices, but to try to give a kind of small grant for connectivity, it was fundamental. And access and equity should be a topic, not necessarily at the institutional level, but at system level.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely, I do agree. And I also like your hint, Remus, about the difference that learning might work online, but what we do at higher education is indeed education, which is a much wider, right, experience. I would like to hear from Dilly and from Leonardo now, kind of a daily experience or something you have been supporting, right, your institutions in this move online, a bit similar to what I have been doing at the Hertie school. So what was a typical thing in your experience? Do you have some anecdote or something to share? Dilly, let's start with Dilly and then Leonardo.
Yes, thank you. I will share a moment that will always be in my memory and experience for the rest of my life. Just a few days before we locked down and had to move everything online back towards the beginning of 2020. The senior leadership team, of which I'm a member, we were all sitting in our offices on one floor of our new building, which we've been very much celebrating, how lovely it will be to spend so much time in this new building. We were looking out over London from our central London positions, and our colleagues came to us and said, today you must have your meeting by sitting in your own offices on this floor and having the meeting through Zoom, because we need to test that you are all capable of learning through and communicating with one another through a Zoom experience. And as you'll imagine, many, several at least senior members of the university community were rather nervous about being put into the situation of being a new learner, of being having that fresh experience, that worrying experience. Shall I know what to do? Will I remember? What if I get something wrong? What if it doesn't go wrong, etc. And we were all back at that moment where something was completely new and we had to be learners right from the beginning again. I think it was a very important experience and one to reflect on, so that we always recall when we are teaching, we are engaging our students in new experiences, new learning opportunities, that we always reflect on how it felt to be back at the beginning of something, a new subject, and that need for reassurance and clarity, and for that sense of us all being in it together. And I think I took that feeling with me, and we all did as colleagues, through the whole experience.
That's a really nice thing to share. And I think this is often what we don't do when we progress with our career, right? The famous curse of knowledge. So to put ourselves in the shoes of those, what we're asking, and putting ourselves back into the learner's position. Very nice. Leonardo, last not least.
Yeah, all right. Thank you so much. So if I may, I'd like to share more than a moment, because frankly speaking, there are like maybe thousands. I'd like to share like a feeling. My first initial feeling that I had at the moment, like as Dilly was saying, where we were really starting understanding what lockdown was. And so if I may make this parallel, I don't know how much of you are familiar with a movie that is called Interstellar. It's not a new one. It's a 2014 movie, as we call, written by the Nolan brothers. Well, basically, for those of you that maybe are not familiar with that movie, it has been set in a dystopian future where basically the humanity was struggling to survive. And so they had to find a new place somewhere, going through a wormhole in the deep space near to Saturn, and in search for a new home for humanity. And now, so so what's in there? Let me go back now to the reality. So why I mentioned this movie here now? Because basically there was a driving forces. There was this kind of dystopian context. There was something unexpected at the time and something totally new. And so this represents somehow the first level of uncertainty that I was immediately feeling. The second level relates to the destination, because again, they were looking, they were in search of this new home in a place near Saturn or somewhere there that was totally unknown, something totally, they don't even know how it was looking like. So again, this is a second level of uncertainty because they were looking something in a place that were again totally unknown. And then the third one, not least important, is the journey. So how they were moving from this, the current space, traveling towards this new place there somewhere. And also the journey itself was not clear, was really full of events and unexpected things. So once again, this to me is the third level of uncertainty. Now, I'm not saying this because I want to push being pessimistic approach. No, it's just because, for those of us who are not that much, let's say, risk adverse, not extremely at least risk adverse, this three-level kind of uncertainty may represent from a certain perspective a good opportunity to make something new, something different. So, but this was a kind of feeling. So three different big sources of pressures and uncertainty. Yeah.
Thank you for this metaphor we get here to imagine, Leonardo. I would like to hear from our audience actually how they experienced the move at their institution, and I would like to the audience to quickly engage with us and tell us how you experienced the move online at your institution. And you can do that either by holding up your phone and scanning with your camera the QR code, which will bring you directly to the question. And we want to know whether it was smooth and whether it was challenging. So I think it could have been smooth, but still challenging, or the other way around. Or you can just go to the website www.menti.com and put the code there. And we will then share the results here. Let's give everybody a little bit of time. Of course, the panelists can do that as well. I would probably have to put, it was quite smooth, but really challenging. Okay, I don't influence. So, Matt, if you can start the activity, the Menti activity. Perfect. Okay, so now we can see while you are voting, it's moving around. Let's give the people another minute. So you can choose both, of course. So we see on the bottom right that we have 43 people having submitted something. Oh yeah, you're still, I see, there's still some movement. There's still more people engaging. So let's say, is that half-half? It's incredible if I see that, I mean, it's not towards the extreme that people strongly agree, but they rather agree that the move online in their institution has been working quite smoothly, but at the same time challenging. So this is really interesting. Perhaps we might discover throughout our discussion what made it smooth and what were the challenges. Okay, I see that people have voted, so let's move back to our panel. And I would like to, Leonardo, if I can ask you, or just follow up with another question to tease you. So we know technology can be an enabler and a barrier. I mean, technology is not a new thing. There is long decades of discussion what technology can do and can't do. What was for you as a person who was supporting, or perhaps also as a person who was teaching but very familiar, what was for you the most difficult challenge over this past year? What were you struggling with, and what would have helped?
Yeah, that's yeah, as you said, it's a kind of eternal a question. Let me say this: there is still a big debate, how using technology. One of the things I was experiencing, and to me was really like, I was struggling on this, was a kind of common sense that in order to move online very quickly, we had to, or someone had to put there the best of technology. So like the best of breed, we bring technology there, put in there, and we are online. And so basically, as I think that all of us, we perfectly know, this is basically a very wrong assumption. It is essential. So though putting technology there is definitely essential, but it's not enough. And so instead of running and say, okay, buy this and buy this one, so I want to make my online exam. So what is the platform? Yes, that's a good question, but it's not the only one. So if we do not perceive technology like the whole stakeholders, we don't perceive technology as useful and easy to use, it does make sense. So it's just putting money there and just putting efforts, maybe they have a very low contribution. So this can become a strong barrier. So do not, this is my struggling thing, do not, or recommendations on how, if you may, do not try to run and put in there all the technology, the best of, taking by, independently, maybe they are really great, but we need to put them in one single picture. And so how to try to overcome this, my personal point of view, and that's what we have done, and we are still doing, it's leveraging, let me say, on a very diverse and cohesive teamwork. So try to put their differences. We need to look at the same phenomenon from a different angles and perspectives. And this can really help us in understanding how we can really make effective use of the technology. And we don't have to forget for making the teaching and the learning happen. So this is my little contribution to this.
Yeah, I think that's I can really share that experience as well. I wanted to ask to Annika, she has left us for a second. So perhaps again, Hilda, I ask you as a student, how did you experience the technology? Can I ask you just did you experience it as something? I mean, there was always this discussion, right, about the new digital generation. I think this is, I don't know whether there is so much difference really, or whether it's the type of, right, the type of technology we are familiar with or not. How did you experience that? Was it a barrier for you, or was it an enabler?
I think this whole technical shift, if one would say, first of all, I'm super impressed by how like the faculty and staff at SSE managed to adapt so quickly to the pandemic, and also get the technical things in place, but also to pedagogically adapt the education to a digital format. So that, I think that was super interesting. But then of course, when it is such a quick shift like this, it becomes it's not weird that some things takes a little bit time to adapt. So like a classic example was in the beginning we had some group works, and then we were like two large groups for working on Zoom, which made us not so able to use the digital format in the most optimal way, because when you're sitting in a room with a lot of people, then it's easier to have large groups. But I think that's really also something that we have been a positive aspect with this pandemic, really. that we've had so much feedback from the professors and the teachers, you know, continuously asking. I mean, normally we have this course evaluations at the end, which they're really pushed for and looked for questions related to the digital format, but also during courses that teachers have been, you know, really like seeking this feedback. And as some has mentioned previously, you know, you're losing this eye contact in the classroom, but I can really see the effort from the teacher side in this aspect.
I think it was a disruption, right, of our practices we've been doing for so long, and then suddenly everybody was kind of, could we do that better in any case, right? It was becoming,
exactly.
And being recorded, of course, online is then different than standing in a classroom, right? And we want to get that feedback. Let's hear a little bit again from our audience, and we will discuss this then with our panelists as well. I would like to know, there were some things that worked unexpectedly well, perhaps, things we wouldn't have expected they would work so well. And I would like to ask the audience to give us some examples, what they wouldn't have expected to work so well. And we will then also discuss with the panel, and where did we fail, right? So again, you can use, it's the same page. So you might need to refresh your window to see the new question. You will have the possibility to write an entire sentence. And let's see, or just so let's see what our audience might say. What worked unexpectedly well? Perhaps we would have said before, oh, this is never going to work. People would have never tried it without the pandemic, right? The time management, the video conferencing, the adaptation of the course curricula to the new medium, absolutely. Technology literacy, office hour meetings, interaction with students. The link was kept between students and professors, even online. It was easier to collaborate by sharing documents and tools online and contributing together to developing docs. I absolutely agree. The teamwork, cross-national collaboration, connecting with students, easier to get people together for a meeting, no travel time, also more sustainable, of course. Negotiation simulations, even multilateral ones. Organizing big meetings with stakeholders, online classes and seminars worked well. Administration offices, wow. So we have a wide variety. I think if we would have asked that question before the pandemic, asking people, do you think these things could work online? I'm not so sure how many people would have put their hand on the fire that these things could work online as well. Administrative offices were responsive, departments usually support and understood, teamwork. Let's move back to the panel. We will make a kind of an export of all this, and we'll share all of these insights from you. Cheaper to attend classes, yeah. I would like to ask, to share perhaps what worked. Hilda has already hinted to some things, what worked exceptionally well or unexpectedly well, but also where did we fail and why? I don't know, Remus, could I ask that to you? What worked well, or would you like to focus on where did we perhaps fail also, and what could we have done better?
I like to add some new dimensions of our discussion. First of all, in all universities, you have a constant dialogue between university and students. And, sometimes in this dialogue, you have differences, you have some even conflicts. That was really a surprise for me, because from the beginning, in our dialogues that we had with students, how we face the situation, how we organize ourselves in order to go further. Students were, very positive and 100% supporting the decisions that we adopted at the level of the university. This is one aspect. The second aspect, we have discussed now about the impact of digitalization on our university, and we have discussed more about teaching. classroom interaction with students, how we developed our courses. In fact, it was a more complex relationship. And one I just mentioned, the discussion between the institution and students, but also in Romania, for example, Romania has 21 million people, depending how you count. And we had 1 million people who practically were ill. Naturally, many of them were professors and some of them were professors in my university. So that was a challenge to keep the interaction with students while the professor was maybe in the hospital. And fortunately, we didn't have very severe cases, but again, it was a matter of adaptation, of rescheduling, and understanding from our students. And another dimension, and I conclude here, practically there have been a lot of new things. For example, vaccination, and even reaction against vaccination, or different other kind of protest, mistrust, and so on. And we, as a School of Government, considered we have to play a role here and to give an example to the society. Never mind, we were speaking about respecting the regulations or vaccination. In this moment, for example, in my university, 80% of the staff, including academic staff, decided to vaccinate, which is a very high percentage for Romania of this moment. And we, for 1 year, we have sent many public messages as an academic community to try to help society as a whole to cope with this crisis. So I do believe the classroom was really wider during that year, because in this process, not just the management of the university or professors have been involved, but also students. And even we discussed in the classroom about this phenomenon around us. So that was also, has been, because in fact still is the case on our agenda, on our learning agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Remus. I have one question, which is funny, because this morning I went in my cupboard to look for one of the first essays I wrote at university, which was on the isolating experience of technology. So I'm a sociologist by training, and it was actually about the telephone and the invention of the telephone, and the idea that the telephone would destroy any kind of local communities, and the work of these sociologists, which is in the American, of course, philosophical debate, a long debate, no, the connection of community and democracy and the role of communities. And the analysis of the sociologists to say, no, it was a transformation of communities that actually happened thanks to the introduction of the telephone, right? So we had very similar discussions throughout history many times again. So the question to Dilly and Hilda: has the pandemic been an isolating experience for teachers, students, or others, also for staff for supporting the learning? Or has it created new forms of collaboration that did not exist before? Yeah, can you give an example, perhaps also from the CIVICA or from your institution?
Yes, thank you. I'll come in first. I think for myself personally, it has not been too much of an isolating experience, but I'm very conscious that whilst we are all in the same sea in this situation, we're not all in the same boat. So some people do not have the network, the personal support, the environment in which to live comfortably in these circumstances, and indeed, the financial situation that will allow easy access through online platforms and so on. So I am very aware that this has been a very differentiated experience for many people. But one really positive example that I can talk about from our engagement with the CIVICA partnership has been just how deeply collaborative our meetings have been through an online platform, how our student representatives, for example, Hilda, who is a wonderful example today, have been very much one member of a collaborative group, a sort of equal member of this group. I think sometimes when we're in physical spaces, in certain rooms, there are certain seating patterns and physical kind of signs of who is in charge and who is not in charge. And those do not happen in the same way, or need not happen in the same way on screen. And I think we've been able to collaborate. And one specific example of something we collaborated on has been, as part of the CIVICA Engage track, has been developing that experience for students where they can themselves connect with civic challenges through many interdisciplinary activities and connect across our different universities. And we've been able to do that through this online platform and have subgroups and sub discussions and so on as needed, but really still to be creative with new, fresh ideas about how we can develop as we go forward. So definitely some great examples of collaboration, but always being mindful of those who have felt marginalized and excluded from activities across the whole of the higher education sector. And we must always be considerate of how we bring those people more and more into the communities.
Absolutely. I mean, there's such a wide array of potential research topics, of things we still do not really know, right? Where we have a feeling for it. And very interesting, your point on the non-existence of hierarchies that might establish in a physical room. Hilda, what was it for you?
Yes, I can start off by just saying that I think Dilly put it very nicely the way she did it, or was I think she described it in a very, very inspiring way. This talking about isolation, but also collaboration. I can definitely agree. And I know all my colleagues who are working with CIVICA as well says that it's of an enormous value to be able to meet all of you and discuss, also during this special situation with the pandemic, tough for everyone to, talk about like, how are you thinking about solving this issue, and how are you doing that we can exchange ideas and solutions with each other. So that I think is really a sign of collaboration through as a result of this pandemic and digitalization. And then I would say that it has, on the topic of collaboration, that it has really brought also at the school, brought us together in the sense that, for example, I wrote my last exam 2 weeks ago, congrats. And then, I got an email from a woman working at HR who sent me all the information prior to the exam, because now HR needs to jump in to help out with the examinations at our school when everything is conducted via Zoom. So, we should really, I think, also emphasize the importance of the professional staff, and how much effort they have put into, helping and collaborating to make the pandemic as smooth as possible, despite the circumstances.
What is
sorry.
Sorry.
No, you go.
No, please, Hilda.
Okay, yeah, and then I just lastly also want to mention maybe more on the topic of isolation, that as a student, you still need to raise the topic of mental health in this situation. Because the situation of students, studying alone from home, maybe you're in a foreign country, and also this uncertainty that we're all experiencing, that we don't know how long it's gonna, go on for, and so on, causes a lot of stress. And at SSC, for example, we have this, that the meeting is at the heart of our education, meaning that we want to push, or we have tried to make it possible to meet in person, but that also implies, the balance of keeping the option open, or setting a strict rule. We're going to do everything, online the next term, for example. It's a hard balance there, but it also imposes a stress on the students and everyone. even though it's for, you know, the greater good. But what we can see, like on a positive note, and I think LSE has done similar things, is offering students like digital meetings with the psychologists online, for example, that we're finding new ways to reach our students who are feeling isolated and not feeling super well at the moment.
I think there the pandemic and the move online are kind of difficult to disentangle. What I found really interesting, Hilda, what you and also Dilly pointed at, is that we might think that technology is dehumanizing and making it more abstract and more cold. But what you are both pointing at is that there were new ways of being human, which are less hierarchical, where we are showing more fragility even because we are experiencing problems. We are all in this together, right? And I think this is something we should perhaps also more emphasize, how we are lowering these barriers and really seeing us as fragile humans that need to connect with each other and to help and to reach out to each other. So that I found really interesting, and both of you in different ways. Anke, I would like to ask you, has the past year changed the way you think about teaching and learning? Why or why not? Has it changed? Has it not changed? And has it changed in your mind the way others think about education and higher education?
Yes, the last year has definitely changed my way of thinking about higher education and learning, because it has opened up so many new tools and opportunities which were sort of there before, and we were talking about it before, but we hadn't really integrated in our teaching practice. And the whole notion of recording videos, recording interviews with others, bringing practitioners in at a very short notice, but also having breakout groups, breakout activities, which are much easier to organize online compared to when you are in an on-site setting where you might only have one room, and it might be much more difficult to do case study teaching, etc., sending people outside to discuss something. So there's a lot of flexibility, but also new opportunities which you can use when you're in an online setting. So and once you start engaging with all these tools, and once you start with engaging with tools also like Mentimeter or other digital tools, then you realize that sort of the way we interact and in an on-site setting is just only one way of one can potentially interact, but there are many other ways which we can use and which we can sort of play with. We do not know how digitalization would have occurred without the pandemic. This is something we will never know, because we were all sort of thrown into it because of the pandemic. And while the pandemic is a tragic event for many people, but also it has led to a new way of caring for each other, which we see in a higher education setting, because we all have to assume in a sort of default setting that, you know, there might be some reason why somebody is late, why somebody hasn't submitted things on time, etc. So which might be pandemic related for all sorts of, you know, in the family, health reasons, mental health reasons, etc. And I think we have become, or at least I can observe that in myself, but also with my peers, we have become much more forgiving and much more flexible and much more caring and much more involved with students and how they work, how they engage with our teaching. So I think, and that is a good thing. I think that the fact that we have become more caring and flexible is a good development, and that in combination with digital tools allows us to search for new ways of involvement with each other, which is very different from before. So my thinking has changed a lot, and I'm actually looking forward to exploring new tools, even, you know, other ways of doing this. We had the joint course with Sciences Po in the spring, which I co-taught with Bruno Pallier again, which was a fantastic experience, because all of a sudden you have two institutions, you have two very different ways of teaching, we have sort of learned from each other a lot, and we have sort of found new ways of engaging with students, which I thought was a rewarding experience, which I wouldn't have had if it hadn't been online, because on site this would have been much more difficult. And
every time I connected Annika to your course, I was kind of amazed, and I thought this would never have happened in such a dynamic way.
Exactly. Well, it was very interactive. You know, the only problem with co-teaching is if you have two instructors and both want to say something, you know, you take up a lot of time and you get into each other's ways. But it was, on the whole, it was a great experience, and it was so much easier because it was online.
And also, I think also the students have become more forgiving also for the teachers. I think they could also see that also the instructors were struggling, right? And were trying to make their best. I mean, I was amazed by the amount of time and effort put by everybody into this, from students to faculty, was really impressive. Leonardo, I would like to ask you one last question, perhaps before we open then the floor to some questions from the audience as well. And the question is, what do you think, what changes and transformations we experienced will just stay there? Because everybody is convinced no major effort needed, it just has become almost a habit, right? And what are the things we did do, because it was a pandemic, but things that will need a push to stay there, but which are worth, in your mind, that they stay there?
All right, that's just multiple questions, Annika, in one single question,
Sorry.
right? So
yeah,
no, that's okay. That's lovely. Now let me try to let me start just elaborating a bit more, a few seconds of what Annika was saying. When we're moving now, you were talking about transformation, right? So when we were moving from the traditional, say, let me say it like that, to the online, some people were expecting to experiencing in the online setting whatever it was in the traditional setting, and they were like disappointing. No, it's not the same. We are not getting the same value, same experience. But the two things will be never same. So that's it's a kind of mindset and framing. We cannot frame thinking today fully online things like exactly as it was. It's a different experience. So it's not has to be better or worse than that. It's a simply different one. Now, going back to your question, Annika, you were saying, what's in there in terms of transformation? Well, we have learned that some of the things that we're assuming that, this is not possible, this is too much challenging, this doesn't apply to my field or to my domain, this doesn't work for me, this doesn't work for my course. This kind of tendency, okay, let me postpone or just rejecting things, I think this can be a great lessons learned that we should keep with us. Now, in terms of transformation, as we know, looking forward, we're moving to, again, we're going to make a next move, and we should be prepared for this because it will be never traditional, it will be never online only, it will be kind of physical and digital, so it will be physical. So we need to be prepared for this. And so the transformation journey is not over at all. And so now we have put there a number of, again, let me go back to your first question that was about technologies. Yeah, we have a number of them. But the reason why we need to use them is going to change very soon. So different reasons, or let's say different contexts and reasons. But now we need to understand how this can be, applied in this digital context. And so we definitely need to keep going with exploration. We need to keep going with experiments and with learning and teaching and learning. As going back to the first contribution, Tilly, when she was saying, giving an example, a great one. We have to sit there and try to see how much we're ready to learn. So it's a matter of readiness for. So this can be, maybe if I can ask you back a question, or it's just provocative, of course, how much are we ready for this? That's what we should ask each of us today here, to see if we feel enough to be ready for dealing this next wave, in making and contributing.
Are we ready? Leonardo, are we ready? What would you all say?
I think that we should look forward. So I maybe feel ready to look forward. So I'm not ready for the destination. I'm just ready for finding a new destination. Yes, if this is the question, yes, I do. I'm very happy to.
The others, are you all ready? Are you ready for the audience questions? Let's see what we have in the audience questions. Thank you, Leonardo. I think there were more, I mean, close to my heart, but we probably need to set up another discussion. And I know that Dilly and Leonardo definitely will discuss the topic of open education with me, right? What the potential is there really to get to a new educational model. Let's see, however, what our audience is also interested in. So how does digitalization of higher education affect the international students at your universities? Yeah, I'm just asking Annika, you want to say, please come in.
Yes, I think it is a double-edged sword. It's ambivalent because on the one level, it allows international students to join in wherever they are. And we had a lot of problems with visa and with traveling, and students might not be able to arrive. And that was obviously very helpful that they could join wherever they were in online seminars. At the same time, we have also realized that once they arrived and then they were confined to their student dorms or to their accommodations in a city they don't know and with no direct interaction with other students, it makes it hard for international students to arrive in an online setting because they have very little opportunity to meet other students, to get familiar with the city, to really engage with the university, to engage with student life, etc. So that is not due to digital learning, it's due to the pandemic, but it still is sort of stays with them as an experience. So there's no sort of ideal model in the pandemic how to study, but it is also hard on international students.
Yeah, certainly there we will have to understand better once the pandemic is over, right? Whether there is more flexible models for people who might be in a very particular situation. Yeah. I think one question is really interesting also. Much academic content, for example, seminars are now shared online. That goes a little bit in the open education corner. But I can also imagine that it will be difficult to make the new free content known to everyone. How can we reach people who are not inside the bubble? I think there it's really about how can we make higher educations a more open, accessible institution? How can we more really share our knowledge? How can we really create knowledge together, right? Not only within our building, but within an interaction of people who might be affected by certain decisions, who might know from the practice, right? So how can we get in touch? Perhaps this is also an interesting question because you're working in this Engage project, Hilda and Billy, to say a few words.
Yes, and I would, thank you. I would say also connecting to work package 4 on master's level, there we have one, you can call it module, that's about sharing content online. And some of the content is supposed to be only for students studying at the universities, but there are also content that is supposed to be, and that's like mini lectures or like a seminar series that should be available to the public. So I think that's an excellent example of actually a project that is about, you know, spreading education and material to the public from the different universities. So check that out if you haven't checked it out yet at CIVICA. And then also with the CIVICA Engage track. Yeah, maybe you want to join in as well, Dilly. Sorry, I got so excited.
Oh, it's great to see you excited, Hilda, and we're very excited to be working with you because of your input and your enthusiasm for working with us. It's great. Great example that you just gave there. I'll add one from the work package 3 from the CIVICA Engage track. I was very excited that we were able to, as part of the CIVICA Engage track, create a kind of capstone assignment called the Showcase assignment, which I'm happy to say rather builds on some of my own academic work around the connected curriculum dimensions. And I think this is a really promising direction of travel for higher education, that we give students many more opportunities to create outputs, communications artifacts, multimedia outputs, whatever they might be in various different formats, directed at specific audiences, at local communities, at non-governmental organizations, at policymakers, at industry leaders, at politicians, and maybe any different kinds of audiences. And I think if we can build many more opportunities for students to be engaging as part of their learning and in the way that we assess that learning, to actively bring in people who are not familiar with the life of a university, who have not had those opportunities, who have not crossed those bridges to come in and join us into this wonderful wide landscape that we can all enjoy together. That then over time, more and more and more people can be brought into that space, and then to learn about these materials, events, opportunities that are available for them, and even perhaps to come back into higher education or into higher education for the first time to really benefit from developing their own life opportunities.
Thank you, Dilly. I think this is probably would be for me something. Of course, we couldn't do everything, but again, we have saved ourselves, right? But we haven't thought about the others during the pandemic. And I think certainly this is not where we have failed, but where we should be working on in the future, because it would be technologically so easy to do if we opened our minds and our ideas, right, to collaborate. There was one question which is interesting from the audience that was also upvoted. What is your experience with the entrance procedure exams and students' exams like? We weren't allowed to have online exams in Serbia. Who wants to say something? I mean, of course, exams are always a big concern, right? We've been running exams at the Hertie school, but I don't know who wants to come in here.
I can give the example of our university. For many years in our university, the entrance exam, it was a written exam. So practically the pandemic situation forced us to change. And now it's more an application with a kind of general view of the profile of our candidates. We not necessarily enjoyed this way of doing the entrance exam, but it was also a surprise. The number of applications doubled, which was really something important. For this year, it's the second time when we use the same system, and we'll see when the pandemic situation will not be any longer challenge for us if we'll go back to the old system or not. So that is a particular example. But if I may have extra 2-3 minutes, I was looking to all questions, and my sincere answer is I don't know how governance, international students, hybrid, online exams, open access, and so on, the financial formula will change in the future for our higher education institutions. But what I know for the future, this experience of online education, digital education, will have a significant impact on the way we'll think on all these topics. And I will stay a little bit on the cost, on the financial formula. Generally, there is an idea digital is cheaper and more accessible. I'm not sure about this, because in order to have, it is a big difference to speak about a program or digital academic programs within an institution, and there is something else when we speak about a country or at the level of the European Union. We need digital infrastructure in order to have equitable higher education programs. So here is a more complex discussion, and I'm very happy our governments and also the Commission have considered to look at the real cost of higher education, even when we speak about a hybrid formula. Thank you.
Thank you, Remus. I have another question perhaps for Leonardo, how can the concept of the university being an academic community be fulfilled through online courses? Or perhaps the question is not how, but can it be fulfilled? Can it be a community if we think only in terms of online courses? What would you say, Leonardo?
I would say that online courses will contribute to fulfill the mission. So I think that we need really, this is what we already know. So using the online courses, look into this specific domain. But my point here is, what's next? So how can we put this becoming one as part of the puzzle? So looking toward the future, there will be a number of opportunities where actually we can make it, going back and trying to include in some of the other questions from the audience, like, work at the international level, how our students can work internationally, for example, and using online. So if we use a different portfolio of methods that are very well orchestrated, we can definitely make something that is great, new, and super high value. So I would say, yeah, online definitely need to be there. We need to understand how to rethink the online anyway things. They in the next future will look like differently from how they are looking today. So this maybe is one stream of research that we want to investigate a bit better, and then looking for different combination of. So not only that thing, but going back, this is my personal point of view now here. Try to see, the digital context. I'm really like to stress this because this can make a different type of experiences.
Yeah, definitely. I also wanted to comment on what Remus, what you said. You doubt whether online is cheaper. I also doubted, having worked now for more than a decade, creating an online school, founding an online school. I think there was once this really interesting initiative by Irish universities who asked their students to please describe in a paragraph their teaching hero. And then they took all these hundreds of texts and they threw it in a word cloud. And the words that came out to describe, the words used most often to describe the teaching hero was not the expertise, or was not any, it was care, it was time, and there was a third word that was really surprising. And I think high quality learning is probably exactly that, and that we cannot replace with any technology, right? So I really doubt we will get anywhere. I was always doubting when the MOOC hype was there, but while it has other advantages, right? If we talk about, I'm just looking through the questions. If we have another, I think we've answered. Irina, tell me if I missed something. Otherwise, I would quickly go back, if I can ask the panelists to still, if they are still awake enough. I would really love to, perhaps to quickly discuss the idea of whether we will get a kind of a different educational model. And perhaps I combine the last two questions. So the open education has been a promise since long, no, to create universities that are more accessible to those outside. And we discussed that now. Can we use now the experience we have gathered in the CIVICA network and in the past year at our campuses? Could we create with this a more open, inclusive and sharing university? And what would really be needed? Do we need money? Do we need the support of our management? Do we need a policy framework? What are the stakeholders that really need to become? I think students have made their bit, instructors have made their bit, probably practitioners that supported the move online have done their bit. What is missing now to really make the next step? Lily, please.
Yes, thank you. It's really, really good questions. From the perspective of the LSE, and I guess also thinking about CIVICA experiences in the future, it seems to me that people, individual people in many different kinds of roles, are all keen and willing and able to go towards a more open and flexible provision. I mean, not every single person, but many people are keen. What is perhaps the thing that will slow down the progress will be the systems that we have that don't quite let us, certainly at the LSE, don't let us move forward as quickly as possible. And this also speaks to one of our participants' comments about governance and issues about our quality assurance regulations, about our online systems for recording credits or qualifications or micro credentials, different ways of packaging up ways of learning and building towards qualifications. And certainly from my perspective, the people are much keener than the systems. So I think we will need some investment, but predominantly in systems. And I think a larger policy framework that can be shared and explored together would also be really helpful.
I would really like to get a short answer from everybody on this. What is needed? What is needed? What people want? I know, Leonardo, you have an interest in change management. As I have more from the practice, you more from probably also from the theoretical and research point of view. What is needed to make this major change happen? Is it a change we want?
You want me to get in very quickly? Well, let me, so I totally agree what Tilly was saying now, so very large policy things, but I would not put in the top 3 in finance. I would put in the top 3, maybe in the first place, going back to the change literature. I mean, the shocking things is there, so we need necessary to get the momentum. And so what we need now, I mean, now it means like today or yesterday, not in a very long term, is the willingness to. So try to be more willing to share things, to have a dialogue, to interact with each other. We have already a number of practices. They may be super best or they can be like good ones. Fine, let's start sharing those things, okay? And then we make the next step forward. But the willingness to start sharing and activating dialogue like we did in the CIVICA, I really find it super exciting. And this is a super high great value, because we are putting together different experiences. Then we may like it, some of them we can apply them, all of them partially, whatever, but we have know-how. So we need now to reduce a little bit the asymmetry of information. And this can be done through, of course, policies, practices, technologies, but I would say first and foremost is the individual willingness to contribute to this larger mission.
Thank you, Leonardo. Anke, what do you think is need to help you, or to help our institution, to help the Hertie School, to help the wider society?
I think what we need is the feedback from students and also feedback from future employers, because what we do is besides personal growth is also to provide skills that students want to use in their future careers. And students need to tell us in the future to what extent and how much digital learning has enriched their experience. What kind of skills can you actually learn online? What kind of skills you might better not learn online? What the ideal mixture is, and that only time will tell, because over time we will get more evaluations, we will get more feedback from students. We also get the experience how labor markets will develop in the future, because digitalization is not only happening in higher education, it's happening everywhere. And people will need new skills and have to update their skills in lifelong learning exercises. So, the whole system is in movement. And I think we need to have opportunities for feedback and for continuous learning in very different settings. So I think what we need to do is really to set up feedback loops at various stages. And obviously we need some money for that. But I think first of all, we need to get the awareness that we actually have to do that. We have to ask students, we have to ask employers how they appreciate the skills that students have learned over the last couple of years.
Feedback and feeding it back into the system, absolutely, and into the not into the system, into the practices. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I do agree. Thanks. Let's hear Remus and then Hilda to give Hilda the last word.
Yeah, thank you. I think a huge change in paradigm has already happened. Digital was something for the future, more or less. That was in 2019. today digital is part of our daily activity. And because it was a question how we'll see our programs when the pandemic situation will not be any longer a challenge, I think the digital will still be part of our daily academic activities for different reasons. First of all, students will not let us go back to the classical face-to-face interactions and less digital instruments. And also, Leonardo, I think, mentioned the fact that we can use, and some of us already did, face-to-face and online instruments at the same time in the classroom or during the semester. So I do believe after this pandemic situation will finish, we will have a kind of assessment of what we have to still keep from the online process in the regular academic classes. And all the others will come. Again, digital or distance learning. Distance learning for many universities used to be an isolated department within our universities. Now this distance learning department is integrated in the DNA of the university. So this is a big change that will impact our future activities. Thank you.
Thank you, Remus. I absolutely do agree. I think my digital team was super happy for this move online, because everybody was knocking at their door and they were really busy and could really kind of engage with the people. Before I give the floor to Hilda for commenting on this, I would mention that we would like really to create a community, to build a community of people being interested in digitalization of higher education. And Irina will share a link where you can sign up in case you are interested to be informed, or also if you would like to contribute to such a community. We would like this to be the start of a discussion to continue. I think what we could learn from today's discussion, there's a lot of learning that happened. We didn't even have time to look at everything. More research is needed, more insights are needed, but we will need a lot of work to do to really take the best from this experience to build the future. So please sign up in the, I don't know, I think it's in the chat. Yeah, it's in the chat, not in the Q&A. And then I give the floor to Hilda.
Thank you. Yeah, I think a lot of wise things has already been said, but just building upon the change management that was mentioned, I would say that from what I remember from my studies on change management is also that it's so important to unite under a common goal to motivate people. And here I think it brings in what Anke talked about as well, with the feedback that we need to sit down and discuss what is really the goal. Do we want a hybrid solution in the future? Is that what works the best? Is our focus to focus on, to become more inclusive, to involve more stakeholders in the education? Is it to enable our students to be anywhere in the world and be able to still, take part? So I think that is really, and it touches upon what I think a lot of speakers has already mentioned. But I think that's key, to unite under a common goal, or maybe try different. That's also a part of management, change management, I think, to try and fail until you find the best version. And that's also why it's so lovely that we have this network, so we can share our trial and error experiences in the future. I think
to have a vision for a better society. And I think it's really nice that what I really liked about many things I found really interesting, but one thing I particularly liked was this aspect that was coming out, that we were sharing the kind of the more human experience. We were all becoming more understanding, more caring, more connecting, and this somehow intuitively would contradict, right, with the move online. So I think this is really interesting, and perhaps it will not be the technology that makes us more human, but I think being connected in that way can add other elements of thinking who we are and what we want to be and how we want to take care of each other, and also the ways in which we can take care of each other. I would like to thank very, very much all of the panelists, all of the speakers, to Mark Hallerberg, to Vanessa, Scherrer, to Mr. Ballesteros, all our panelists, that you made the time to come, to think about these questions, to share your thoughts, your experiences. I also would like to thank our CIVICA network. It's really fun and interesting and great to work in this network, great institutions, great people to work with. And again, I would like to say a special thank to Irina Stelea, our CIVICA communications manager, for making this happen today. I think the recording will be made available, if I understood correctly from Irina. We will probably also make a kind of a cut together some highlights. People don't want to watch everything. And yeah, again, many, many thanks for joining us today. And I will hopefully see you very soon, also hopefully in person. I would have loved to sit on some red sofa on the Hertie campus for today. We will do that next time somewhere in one of our lovely institutions. Thank you so much to everybody.